You know, in the shadows of global politics, there's a hidden game that's always in motion. It's a world of secrets, high-stakes strategy, and the consequences are very, very real. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain just a little bit on 4 spy stories that played out across the globe just this past week.
So when you think of a spy, what comes to mind? Probably something out of a movie, right? Trench coats, fancy gadgets. But the reality of modern espionage is, well, it's a lot more complex. It's fought with satellites and algorithms, sure, but it's also fought in secret negotiations to free hostages and through subtle influence campaigns on college campuses. It really is a global chessboard, and we're about to look at some key moves being made right now.
So, for today's briefing, we're tracking 4 big stories. First, a major tech failure for China in space. Then, we'll look at Beijing's quiet push for influence in Europe. After that, a super tense hostage deal led by France. And finally, we'll see why Japan is completely overhauling its intelligence agencies.
Okay, let's start way up, high above the Earth, on the technological front line. This is where the battle for the ultimate high ground is fought, and where one tiny failure can have massive consequences.
4. Just remember that number. Because right now, intelligence analysts in both Beijing and Washington are paying very close attention to it. Why? Because China just lost 4 of its most critical spy satellites, all within a few days. So what on earth happened? It was, frankly, a cascade of failures. On November 9th, 2 of their cutting-edge Chotian satellites just failed to make it into orbit. Then, literally the very next day, 2 more, a high-res observation satellite and an experimental one, were lost during launch. And we're not talking about backups here. Each one of these was a vital piece of China's strategic intelligence puzzle. The secret sauce behind these Chotian satellites was a brand new technology called VLEO. That's Very Low Earth Orbit. The idea is to fly satellites way closer to Earth, basically skimming the top of the atmosphere. Why? To get incredibly sharp, near real-time images. You can imagine how that would be a complete game changer for tracking things like troop movements or naval fleets. But here's the catch. VLEO is a huge gamble. High risk, high reward. The pros are obvious. You get faster, crystal-clear images from smaller satellites, but the cons are brutal. You're flying in an incredibly hostile environment. There's constant atmospheric drag trying to pull you down, and a much higher risk of getting hit by space junk. It seems China just learned that lesson the hard way. So let's be really clear here. This isn't just a technical glitch. This is a major setback for Beijing. It puts them on the back foot in the high-stakes race against the US to control the next generation of space intelligence. This is a big delay for a program that was supposed to give them a critical edge.
Okay, let's come back down to Earth. We're shifting from the cold, hard tech of space to the much more subtle human front. We're talking about a game played not with rockets, but with relationships, ideas, and soft power.
It all starts with something that sounds, perfectly normal. The European Union announces it wants more students from Hong Kong, even offers scholarships. A great educational opportunity, right? Well, for Beijing's intelligence apparatus, they see something else. They see a tactical opening.
To understand why, you need to know about an organization called the United Front Work Department, the UFWD. This is a very powerful and often misunderstood part of the Chinese Communist Party. Its entire job is to build influence abroad, to shape perceptions, and to get groups overseas to align with Beijing's goals. And they literally have a playbook for this. First, they target the ideal candidates, young, bilingual students. Then, Chinese embassies start making contacts, identifying potential leaders in the community. Next, they offer funding to student associations. And the final move? They activate these networks to organize events and push pro-CCP narratives on campus. It's a very subtle, long-term play.
And make no mistake, this is a top priority. For President Xi Jinping, Europe has become the main laboratory for testing out this modernized influence strategy. The end goal is to build a global network of loyal actors who can push the party's interests from inside their new home countries.
So we've gone from the long game of influence to the sharp, immediate edge of intelligence work, covert diplomacy. This is where spies become negotiators and where finding the right piece of leverage can literally save a life. On November 4th, 2 French citizens, Cécile Kohler and Jacques Paris, were finally brought home. They'd been held in an Iranian prison on espionage charges. And their release? It was no accident. It was the end result of a meticulously planned intelligence operation. The man behind it was Nicholas Lerner, the head of France's Foreign Intelligence Service, the DGSE, and his strategy was brilliant in its cold logic. He ordered his teams to review every single Iranian counter-espionage file they had, just looking for a bargaining chip. And they found one. They arrested an Iranian national back in February, and that arrest gave them the leverage they needed to start secret talks.
And this timeline just lays out how patient they were. This took 9 months. After that arrest, French and Iranian emissaries held all these secret talks about everything from sanctions to security in Iraq. It all led up to that one moment on November 4th when the exchange finally happened. A true masterclass in intelligence-led diplomacy.
Okay, for our last story, we're turning inward, to the home front, because sometimes the biggest challenge isn't an external threat, but the need to look at your own capabilities and say, okay, we need a complete reboot.
And this is the question that's buzzing all over Tokyo right now. Is Japan building its own CIA? I mean, for decades, Japan's post-war constitution has put really strict limits on its spy agencies. But now, with a whole new set of global pressures, it looks like a major overhaul is coming.
Here's the core of the issue. Right now, Japan's different intelligence agencies all work in their own separate silos. They don't talk to each other, they don't share information efficiently. The new plan? Create a central coordinating agency, kind of like the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the US, with one powerful director to make sure everyone's on the same page. So why now? A few things are driving this. Public opinion is actually starting to shift. There have been some recent intelligence failures. And get this, 17 Japanese businessmen have been arrested in China on spying charges since 2014. But the biggest driver might just be a growing uncertainty in Tokyo about whether they can always rely on the US for protection.
But this reform is far from a sure thing. As this quote from a former analyst makes pretty clear, the government is on shaky ground. The prime minister is pushing for this hard, but she is facing huge political hurdles. Getting this controversial reform across the finish line is going to be a real fight.
So there you have it. From the highest reaches of orbit to a university campus. From a prison cell in Tehran to the parliament in Tokyo, the world of modern intelligence is just this vast, interconnected, and constantly changing chessboard. The strategies are always evolving, the players are constantly adapting, and the stakes just keep getting higher. It leaves us with one big question. As technology and politics keep reshaping the board, what on earth is the next move going to be?